Check, check. Okay. Top news. In today's news, okay. In today's news, judge expanded a restraining order against Beto O'Rourke and his organization for fundraising efforts related to Texas Democrats who left Texas during a redistricting battle. Judge Megan Fahey stated that harm to the state is imminent without this order, which is necessary to prevent irreparable injury. Paxton's office is investigating Powered by the People and Texas Majority PAC for alleged deceptive fundraising practices. After the ruling, Paxton declared that the court halted O'Rourke's fundraising efforts and frozen his ability to send money outside of Texas. Who is Beto O'Rourke? Former U.S. Representative, Democratic Party, served as U.S. Representative for Texas's 16th District from 2013 to 2019. What does he currently do? Member of the Democratic Party, candidate for presidential nomination in 2020, and Democrats nominee for 2022 Texas gubernatorial election. Okay, but what is he doing now? Nothing. He's not doing anything. He's just a guy. He's just a guy right now. He has a music business, brief career in music during his college years. Okay, so he's nobody. It's a wonderful picture. Texas AG, Attorney General Ken Paxton. A judge has expanded a temporary restraining order against former U.S. Representative Robert O'Rourke, Beto O'Rourke, and his organization Powered by People, as well as Act Blue and any bank or financial institution with whom they do business. The order was issued on Saturday after AG Ken Paxton filed a motion with the court on Friday requesting it to expand an initial order issued last week. 8 days ago, a Texas district court granted a request for a temporary restraining order against O'Rourke and Power by the People after both claimed to raise money to fund dozens of House Democrats leaving Texas. More than 50 Democrats, I think it was 55, left in protest to prevent the Texas House from conducting official business, from conducting a gerrymander in the middle of the off-season. Paxton's office also launched an investigation into Powered by the People and Texas Majority PAC. The court's initial order blocked O'Rourke and Powered by People from continuing to raise or distribute money to the Democrat lawmakers. After the ruling, O'Rourke said the order was not stopping him from raising money. The next day, he held a rally in Fort Worth, saying, "Still here, still raising and rallying to stop the steal of 5 congressional seats in Texas." O'Rourke posted videos to social media of him speaking at rallies to raise money for the House Democratic cause in Kansas City and in Fort Worth. He also posted links to raise money, saying the gloves are off, donate now. Powered by People and the Democratic PAC Act Blue continue to raise money to fight Texas redistricting efforts, prompting Paxton to file a motion of contempt against O'Rourke. Late Friday, Paxton filed an amended petition requesting the court to revoke Powered by People's charter, arguing it is responsible for deceptively fundraising and handing out Beto bribes to Democrat legislatures in exchange for breaking quorum. Paxton argues that O'Rourke and the organization have deceived donors, bought off Texas politicians, and unlawfully assisted runaway Democrats in avoiding arrest. He asked the court to enforce its previous TRO, throw Beto behind bars, and revoke Powered by People's charter for its unlawful conduct. There must be consequences. Jeez. The amended complaint claims O'Rourke and Powered by People are directing consumers to political fundraising platforms for the express political purpose of fighting Republicans and protecting Democratic seats from corrupt Republicans. Meanwhile, the funds are actually being used for... Meanwhile, the funds are actually being used for lavish personal expenditures, travel on private jets, luxury hotel accommodations, fine dining that is disconnected from and has no legitimate purpose relating to their legislative positions. It also claims the descendants engaged in unlawful and deceptive fundraising practices in Tarrant County and engaged in deceptive trade practices in the solicitation and receipt of donations. On Saturday, Judge Megan Fahey issued an expanded TRO through September 5th and scheduled a hearing for a temporary injunction on September 2nd. The court finds that harm is imminent to the state, and if the court does not issue this order, the state will be irreparably injured. Jeez. Specifically, defendants' fundraising conduct constitutes false, misleading, or deceptive acts under the Texas Deceptive Trade Practices Act. On Saturday, O'Rourke was involved in another rally in Austin and thanked everyone who has joined us in this fight for Texas. As a result of their fundraising efforts, they donated more than $1 million to the Texas Legislative Black Caucus, the Texas House Democratic Caucus, and the Mexican American Legislative Caucus during the special session. All right. Three Republican-led states to deploy National Guard troops to the U.S. Capitol. Wonderful. Republican governors of South Carolina and West Virginia are deploying hundreds of National Guard troops to Washington, D.C. at the request of Donald Trump. South Carolina Governor Henry McMaster stated he would send 200 National Guard troops in response to a Pentagon request. West Virginia Governor Patrick Morrisey announced he's deploying 300 to 400 National Guard troops for public safety, quote unquote. Washington's violent crime rate hit a 30-year low in 2024, according to Justice Department data, contradicting claims of widespread crime in the area. Who's the third state? Bolster the rough fleet. There's 800 troops that President Trump has already deployed in the city. West Virginia would send 300 to 400. South Carolina will send 200. And Ohio, of course, Ohio, will send 150 military police from their National Guard. Trump declared a public safety emergency on Monday. Look at this language. Trump has painted a portrait of the nation's capital as beset by violent gangs and bloodthirsty criminals. Yep, that's exactly why Ohio's a slur. What do you think about the scrolling thing in the bottom right? And the sound of the mic. How does a mic sound? U.S. envoy says Putin agreed to security protections for Ukraine as part of Trump's summit. You don't see it? This thing down here? Okay, good. Yeah, it's a lot of text. It's the placeholder for a camera shot. Once I get that up and going. U.S. envoy says Putin agreed to security protections for Ukraine as part of Trump's summit. Russian leader Putin agreed at his summit with President Trump to allow the U.S. and European allies to offer Ukraine a security guarantee resembling NATO's collective defense mandate as part of an eventual deal to end the war. Of course he said that. The U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff described the agreement as game-changing and said Russia would make a legislative commitment not to go after any additional territory in Ukraine. Ukrainian President Zelensky welcomed the willingness to contribute to security guarantees for Ukraine, but said the details remained unclear. Trump and Putin agreed the U.S. would be able to offer Ukraine security guarantees, but not unless Ukraine gives up Donetsk, which Russia already has about 75% of Donetsk. According to U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, even as many details of last week's meeting remain unclear, European leaders will join Zelensky at his high-stakes meeting with the U.S. president in Washington on Monday in a show of support. Beijing benefits from the summit. Trump said he would hold off on raising tariffs on Chinese goods over purchases of Russian oil, citing progress with Putin. The EU-US trade statement, on the other hand, is running up against a wall. Why? Held up by a dispute regarding wording surrounding the rules that target the behavior of big tech. All the trade chaos has nations from Japan to the UK growing restless, waiting for the US to make good on promises. Over 300 protests held Saturday against Trump's redistricting push. Over 300 protests were held Saturday in 34 states across the country. Wow. Against the Texas Republican redistricting plan backed by Trump that could net the party 5 additional seats in Congress. The protests were organized by groups like the Texas for All Coalition and the Democratic National Committee to combat what they view as an attempt by Trump to take Congress by the hook or by crook, by silencing the voices of communities of color. Trump dismissed concerns about the proposed Texas map, describing it as a very simple redrawing where Republicans pick up 5 seats. Yes, that's what it is. And that's why it's bad. What is the Texas popular Republican versus Democrat voters? The heck? Okay. Last updated August 8th, 2025. Is that real? Total registered voters, 17 million in Texas, 8.1 million Democrats, 6.6 million Republicans. That's 46% Democrat, 37% Republican. Texas voters do not register by party. However, when those voters participate in a partisan primary, that ballot choice is recorded and reported in lieu of a party registration. So 46% Democrat and 38% Republican, but yet Trump and Greg Abbott and all them, that's the percentage of voters in Texas who are Democrat versus Republican. Texas, the red state, 37% Republican, 46% Democrat. Out of 17 million voters, 8 million are Democrats, 6 million are Republicans. But MAGA wants to say that Texas has voted overwhelmingly for Republicans. Yeah. "50 states, voter registration by party." Geez, Wyoming? 81% registered Republicans? 10% registered Democrats. Where's Wyoming? Wyoming is tiny. There's only 500,000 people in Wyoming. I don't know why that seems so low. I mean, I know why that seems so low. It's like... Palm Beach has 1.5 million people by itself. Okay, that's kind of wild. It's quite desolate. The wind blows all the people out unless they're of sturdy breeding. Why does the bigger state not simply eat the smaller states? There's only 2 escalators in the whole state. Do they pay you? Is it like Alaska where you get like a monthly stipend? Well, let's see. As of 2013, Wyoming only had 2 escalators. And I guess we'll never know, because we're not subscribed. 2 sets. Technically, there's 4. Okay, there's 4 escalators in Wyoming. That's good. Gathered in cities across the country on Saturday to protest Trump's goal of keeping control of Congress after the 2026 midterms by pushing Republican-led states to redraw their congressional maps in favor of Republicans. The biggest event appeared to be at the Texas Capitol in Austin, where a 2-week-long walkout by Democratic state representatives has temporarily prevented Republican lawmakers from passing a redrawn map. Oh, it says Wyoming does not pay you to relocate there. Maybe they did for a while. Rubio says a ceasefire deal is not off the table between Ukraine and Russia. But didn't they agree that they don't want to do a ceasefire, they want to do a peace deal? There's another backtrack. Greatest backtrack of all time. Following failed talks in Riyadh, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio warned that American diplomacy may fail to end the Ukraine war despite efforts to engineer peace. Rubio highlighted concessions, noting Putin demanded surrender of the remaining quarter of Donetsk, and Russia could retain roughly 20% of Ukraine, saying you can't have a peace agreement unless both sides give and get. Well, what is Russia giving? On Monday, Zelensky will meet... Yeah, we knew that. Rubio cautioned that if this effort doesn't work out, there will be additional consequences to Russia, as continued fighting could kill thousands. Yeah. Old news. Former ambassador baffled by Marco Rubio's apparent flip-flop on Russia. Former U.S. ambassador was baffled by comments the Secretary of State made on Sunday about the best way to end the war in Ukraine. On the Sunday morning talk shows, Secretary of State Marco Rubio suggested that both Ukraine and Russia would need to make concessions to end the war. Similarly, Rubio said that the U.S. should back off on its sanctions against Russia because they are harming diplomacy between the countries. Daniel Fried, a former ambassador to Poland, discussed Rubio's apparent flip-flop over Russia on CNN's Newsroom with Frederica Whitfield on Sunday. Secretary Rubio, on morning talk shows, said that sanctions don't work and could harm diplomacy. Fried recounted, "What? The U.S. has imposed numerous sanctions on Russia in response to its invasion of Ukraine in 2022. Some experts have suggested that the sanctions nearly crippled Russia's economy before Donald Trump took office." Fried also reminded viewers that Rubio's comments stand in stark opposition to Trump's positions on sanctions. It was just 2 days ago, going to Anchorage, that Trump himself said, "If we don't get a ceasefire, I'll be unhappy and big sanctions will come." Does this administration really believe that economic pressure doesn't work? Fried asked. This is an administration that loves economic pressure to open diplomacy. So what was the secretary talking about? Well, they got 75% of it. Of Donetsk, at least. I don't know about the other one. Or at least that's what they claim to open diplomacy. But then diplomacy never happens. All right. Federalist paper. It's another Hamilton. Concerning dangers from dissensions between the states. Oof. Okie dokie. To the people of the state of New York. It is sometimes asked, with an air of seeming triumph, what inducements could the states have, if disunited, to make war upon each other? It would be a full answer to this question to say precisely the same inducements which have at different times deluged in blood all the nations in the world. But unfortunately for us, the question admits of a more particular answer. There are causes of differences within our immediate contemplation, of the tendency of which, even under the restraints of a federal constitution, we have had sufficient experience to enable us to form a judgment of what might be expected if those restraints were removed. Territorial disputes have at all times been found one of the most fertile sources of hostility among nations. Perhaps the greatest proportion of wars that have desolated the earth have sprung from this origin. This cause would exist among us in full force. We have a vast tract of unsettled territory within the boundaries of the United States. There still are discordant and undecided claims between several of them, and the dissolution of the Union would lay a foundation for similar claims between them all. It is well known that they have heretofore had serious and animated discussion concerning the rights to the lands which were ungranted at the time of the Revolution, and which usually went under the name of Crown lands. The states within the limits of whose colonial governments they were comprised have claimed them as their property. The others have contended that the rights of the Crown in this article devolved upon the Union, especially as to all that part of the Western Territory which, either by actual possession or through the submission of the Indian proprietors, was subjected to the jurisdiction of the King of Great Britain, till it was relinquished in the Treaty of Peace. What was the Treaty of Peace? No, not the Treaty of Paris. Treaty of Peace, USA. What is he referring to? The Definitive Treaty of Peace, 1783. The Paris Peace Treaty. Okay, the Treaty of Paris. What's the actual treaty? Treaty of Paris, signed in Paris by representatives of King George III and representatives of the U.S. on September 3rd, 1783, officially ended the War of American Independence and recognized the 13 colonies which had been part of the colonial British America. Wow. The treaty set the boundaries between British North America, later called Canada, and the U.S. on the lines the British labeled as exceedingly generous. Although exact boundary definitions in the far northwest and to the south continued to be subject to some controversy. Details included fishing rights and restoration of property and prisoners of war. The treaty and the separate peace treaties between Great Britain and the nations that supported the American cause, including France and Spain and the Dutch Republic, are known collectively as the Peace of Paris. Only Article 1 of the treaty, which acknowledges the U.S.'s existence as a free, sovereign, and independent state, remains in force. States. Okay. The states within the limits of whose colonial governments they were comprised have claimed them as their property. The others have contended that the rights of the Crown in this article devolved upon the Union, especially as to all that part of the Western Territory which, either by actual possession or through the submission of the Indian proprietors, was subjected to the jurisdiction of the King of Great Britain until it was relinquished in the Treaty of Peace. This, it has been said, was at all events an acquisition to the Confederacy. This was at all events an acquisition to the Confederacy by compact with a foreign power. It has been the prudent policy of Congress to appease this controversy by prevailing upon the states to make cessions to the United States for the benefit of the whole. This has been so far accomplished as, under the United States, under a continuation of the Union, this has been so far accomplished as to afford a decided prospect of an amicable termination of the dispute. A dismemberment of the Confederacy, however, would revive this dispute and would create others on the same subject. At present, a large part of the vacant Western Territory is, by cession at least, if not by any anterior right, the common property of the Union. If that were at an end, the states which made the cession on a principle of federal compromise would be apt, when the motive of the grant had ceased, to reclaim the lands as a reversion. The other states would no doubt insist on a proportion by right of representation. Their argument would be that a grant once made could not be revoked, and that the justice of participating in territory acquired or secured by the joint efforts of the Confederacy remain undiminished. If, contrary to probability, it should be admitted by all the states that each had a right to a share of this common stock, there would still be a difficulty to be surmounted as to a proper rule of appointment. Different principles would be set up by different states for this purpose, and as they would affect the opposite interests of the parties, they might not easily be susceptible of a pacific adjustment. If the Union was dissolved, all the unclaimed territory would be up for grabs, and all the different confederacies would essentially be fighting over them. That's what I understand that to mean. Even if they were to agree that they should each get an equal portion, they would still be fighting over which portions. In the wide field of Western territory, therefore, we perceive an ample theater for hostile pretensions without any umpire or common judge to interpose between the contending parties. The Wild West. Ample theater for hostile pretensions in the West without anybody to umpire or judge or try to mete out the fighting. To reason from the past to the future, we shall have good ground to apprehend that the sword would sometimes be appealed to as the arbiter of their differences. The circumstances of the dispute between Connecticut and Pennsylvania respecting the land at Wyoming admonish us not to be sanguine in expecting an easy accommodation of such differences. The Articles of Confederation obliged the parties to submit the matter to the decision of a federal court. The submission was made, and the court decided in favor of Pennsylvania. But Connecticut gave strong indications of dissatisfaction with that determination. Nor did she appear to be entirely resigned to it, till, by negotiation and management, something like an equivalent was found for the loss she supposed herself to have sustained. Nothing here said is intended to convey the slightest censure on the conduct of the state. She no doubt sincerely believed herself to have been injured by the decision, and states, like individuals, acquiesce with great reluctance in determinations to their disadvantage. Stand by, I'll be right back. Okay. Oh, can you still hear my vaping? I don't think so. Here, I'm going to do it. Oh, maybe you can. Hey, Fafa. Yeah. Well, I put some, does it sound better anyway? At least a little bit. Excellent. Noise suppression, gain, compressor, and a 3-band. The Articles of Confederation obliged the parties to submit the matter to the decision of a federal court. The submission was made, and the court decided in favor of Pennsylvania. Oh, we did this. Those who had an opportunity of seeing the inside of the transaction... Oof. Hamilton. Jeez Louise. Buddy, cut me some slack. Those who had an opportunity of seeing the inside of the transactions which attended the progress of the controversy between this state and the District of Vermont can vouch the opposition we experienced, as well from states not interested as from those which were interested in the claim, and can attest the danger to which the peace of the Confederacy might have been exposed had this state attempted to assert its rights by force. Did anybody understand that one? Those who had an opportunity of seeing the inside of the transactions which attended the progress of the controversy between this state and the District of Vermont. Which state? Connecticut? Can vouch the opposition we experienced. Oh, no. This state. New York. The one he's writing in. People say the New York. Those who saw the inside of the transactions which attended the progress of the controversy. So New York and Vermont had a controversy between them. Those who saw the workings of that controversy can vouch that there was opposition from states not interested in the claim and from states which were interested in the claim, and can attest the danger to which the peace of the Confederacy might have been exposed had this state attempted to assert its rights by force. So if New York had attempted to use violence, the peace of the Confederacy would have been threatened. Okay, but what? New York and Vermont, 1700s dispute. Huh. Many Vermonters took part in the American Revolution on the side of the Revolution, but the Continental Congress did not recognize the independence of Vermont, then also known as the New Hampshire Grants, due to objections from New York, which had conflicting property claims. So Vermont wanted parts of the land that New York considered theirs. So that's probably the... What is this? The Vermont Republic? Republic. New York and Vermont. A dispute over property. Wanted some New York had violent. Okay. Two motives preponderated. One second. Okay. In the context of that Hamilton is using it, the term preponderated is used to describe the dominant or prevailing influence of certain motives in a political dispute. Two motives prevailed in that opposition. Why couldn't he just say two motives prevailed? I guess it's good that he wrote smart, because maybe that's what helped sway the people. But man, it sucks for me now in 2025. All right. Two motives preponderated, two motives prevailed in that opposition. One, a jealousy entertained of our future power, and the other, the interest of certain individuals of influence in the neighboring states. A jealousy entertained of our future power, and the other, the interest of certain individuals of influence in the neighboring states who had obtained grants of lands under the actual government of that district. Even the states which brought forward claims in contradiction to ours seemed more solicitous to dismember this state than to establish their own pretensions. So other states who brought forward claims in the dispute seemed more to want to dismember New York than to establish their own whatever thing they were wanting. These were New Hampshire, Massachusetts, and Connecticut. New Jersey and Rhode Island, upon all occasions, discovered a warm zeal for the independence of Vermont, and Maryland, till alarmed by the appearance of a connection between Canada and that state, entered deeply into the same views. These, being small states, saw with an unfriendly eye the perspective of our growing greatness. In a review of these transactions, we may trace some of the causes which would be likely to embroil the states with each other. If it should be their unpropitious destiny to become disunited. Unfavorable, ill-fated, or lucky. Unpropitious. Unpropitious. Oh, yeah, that makes sense. Unpropitious. If it should be their unpropitious destiny to become disunited. Now I forgot what it means. If it should be their unfavorable destiny. The competitions of commerce would be another fruitful source of contention. So what, land, commerce, territory, commerce. The competitions of commerce would be another fruitful source of contention. The states less favorably circumstanced would be desirous of escaping from the disadvantages of local situation and of sharing in the advantages of their more fortunate neighbors. So yeah, any confederacy that didn't have good land would want the land of the confederacies that had better land. Each state or separate confederacy would pursue a system of commercial policy peculiar to itself. This would occasion distinctions, preferences, and exclusions, which would beget discontent. The habits of intercourse on the basis of equal privileges, to which we have been accustomed since the earliest settlement of the country, would give a keener edge to those causes of discontent than they would naturally have independent of this circumstance. We should be ready to denominate injuries. We should be ready to denominate injuries those things which were in reality the justifiable acts of independent sovereignties consulting a distinct interest. We should label, we should denominate. We should be ready to label injuries, to label as injuries those things which were the justifiable acts of independent sovereignties consulting a distinct interest. The spirit of enterprise, which characterizes the commercial part of America, has left no occasion of displaying itself unimproved. It is not at all probable that this unbridled spirit would pay much respect to those regulations of trade by which particular states might endeavor to secure exclusive benefits to their own citizens. The infractions of these regulations on one side, the efforts to prevent and repel them on the other, would naturally lead to outrages, and these to reprisals and war. The opportunities which some states would have of rendering others tributary to them by commercial regulations would be impatiently submitted to by the tributary states. The relative situation of New York, Connecticut, and New Jersey would afford an example of this kind. New York, from the necessities of revenue, must lay duties on her importations. A great part of these duties must be paid by the inhabitants of the two other states in the capacity of consumers of what we import. New York would neither be willing nor able to forego this advantage. Her citizens would not consent that a duty paid by them should be remitted in favor of the citizens of her neighbors, nor would it be practicable, if there were not this impediment in the way, to distinguish the customers in our own markets. Would Connecticut and New Jersey long submit to be taxed by New York for her exclusive benefit? Should we be long permitted to remain in the quiet and undisturbed enjoyment of a metropolis, from the possession of which we derived an advantage so odious to our neighbors, and in their opinion so oppressive? Should we be able to preserve it against the incumbent weight of Connecticut on the one side and the cooperating pressure of New Jersey on the other? These are questions that temerity alone will answer in the affirmative. The public debt of the Union would be a further cause of collision between the separate states or confederacies. The apportionment in the first instance and the progressive extinguishment afterward would be alike productive of ill humor and animosity. How would it be possible to agree upon a rule of apportionment satisfactory to all? there is scarcely any that can be proposed which is entirely free from real objections. These, as usual, would be exaggerated by the adverse interest of the parties. There are even dissimilar views among the states as to the general principle of discharging the public debt. Some of them, either less impressed with the importance of national credit, or because their citizens have little, if any, immediate interest in the question, feel an indifference, if not a repugnance, to the payment of the domestic debt at any rate. These would be inclined to magnify the difficulties of a distribution. Others of them, a numerous body of whose citizens are creditors to the public beyond proportion of the state in the total amount of the national debt, would be strenuous for some equitable and effective provision. The procrastinations of the former would excite the resentments of the latter. The settlement of a rule would, in the meantime, be postponed by real differences of opinion and affected delays. The citizens of the United States interested would clamor. The citizens of the states interested would clamor. Foreign powers would urge for the satisfaction of their just demands, and the peace of the states would be hazarded to the double contingency of external invasion and internal contention. Suppose the difficulties of agreeing upon a rule surmounted and the apportionment made. Still there is great room to suppose that the rule agreed upon would, upon experiment, be found to bear harder upon some states than upon others. Those which were sufferers by it would naturally seek for a mitigation of the burden. The others would as naturally be disinclined to a revision, which was likely to end in an increase of their own encumbrances. Their refusal would be too plausible a pretext to the complaining states to withhold their contributions, not to be embraced with avidity, eagerness or intense desire, not to be embraced with eagerness, and the non-compliance of these states with their engagements would be a ground of bitter discussion and altercation. If even the rule adopted should in practice justify the equality of its principle, still delinquencies in payments on the part of some of the states would result from a diversity of other causes. The real deficiency of resources, the mismanagement of their finances, accidental disorders in the management of the government, and, in addition to the rest, the reluctance with which men commonly part with money for purposes that have outlived the exigencies which produced them, and interfere with the supply of immediate wants. Urgent needs or pressing demands, exigencies. Delinquencies, from whatever causes, would be productive of complaints, recriminations, and quarrels. There is, perhaps, nothing more likely to disturb the tranquillity of nations than their being bound to mutual contributions for any common object that does not yield an equal and coincident benefit. For it is an observation, as true as it is trite, that there is nothing men differ so readily about as the repayment of money. Laws in violation... stand by. Laws in violation of private contracts, as they amount to aggressions on the rights of those states whose citizens are injured by them, may be considered as another probable source of hostility. We are not authorized to expect that a more liberal or more equitable spirit would preside over the legislations of the individual states hereafter, if unrestrained by any additional checks, than we have heretofore seen in too many instances disgracing their several codes. We have observed the disposition to retaliation excited in Connecticut in consequence of the enormities perpetuated by the legislature of Rhode Island, and we reasonably infer that in similar cases, under other circumstances, a war, not of parchment but of sword, would chastise such atrocious breaches of moral obligation and social justice. The probability of incompatible alliances between the different states or confederacies and different foreign nations, and the effects of this situation upon the peace of the whole, have been sufficiently unfolded in some preceding papers. From the view they have exhibited of this part of the subject, this conclusion is to be drawn, that America, if not connected at all, or only by the feeble tie of a simple league, offensive and defensive, would, by the operation of such jarring alliances, be gradually entangled in all the pernicious labyrinths of European politics and wars, and by the destructive contentions of the parts into which she was divided, would be likely to become a prey to the artifices and machinations of powers equally the enemies of them all. Divide et impera must be the motto of every nation that either hates us or fears us. Ooh. Who was it? Russia says they will destroy the U.S. from the inside. Nikita Khrushchev. In 1956, Nikita Khrushchev said, "We will take America without firing a shot. We do not have to invade the U.S. We will destroy you from within." That's what Putin's been doing. But yeah, right here. Federalist paper number 7. Divide and command must be the motto of every nation that either hates us or fears us. Cool. Well, that's Federalist paper number 7. Territory. Territorial disputes. Commerce and competition. Public debt of the Union. What does he mean by that? Ah, literally what it says. The debt carried by the Union from doing the Revolutionary War. Laws in violation of private contracts. Okay. That's enough of that for tonight. Let's do a Noita. Yay, Noita. Oh, I don't know what happened. Just got back. Where'd you go? Oh, what? I'm a worm. That was fucking cool. Oh, fuck. It died of explosion. Oh, I love these. Papa, you ever beaten Noita? Whoa, fuck. Well, oops. He's okay with fire. That makes sense. Hmm. Angry Ghost comes to your aid, copying nearby spells and projectiles. Fungal Colony. Slime near you spontaneously turns into fungal creatures. Close Call. Gain an additional dance to deal critical hits as long as there are enemies near you. Let's do the Friendly Ghost. Don't like that. Ghosty. The ghost name is Ghosty. Oops. Didn't mean to kill the fish. His name was Fishy. Ghosty Von Trier. Why do they bleed so much magma? It's dangerous. Faster movement. More blood. Gold nuggets never disappear. Faster movement. Oh, here's where we die. Holy crap. I'm dead now. Look at me. I am dead now. What? Ooh, a shop. All right, one more. Oh, fuck. Shit. Ah. Okay, no, I want out of here. Yes. What? Okay. All right. That's enough for tonight. Good night, everybody. Thanks for joining. See you probably tomorrow night. Good night.